The night enveloped Velenthra like a dark, dense, oppressive cloak. My footsteps echoed on the damp cobblestones as I ventured deeper into the city's narrow alleys, drawn by a presence I felt but couldn't see. There was no moon, only darkness, dotted with faint lights from closed windows. It was in one of these alleys that I first saw her. She stood still under the dim glow of a streetlight. Her black hair cascaded over her shoulders, contrasting with her marble-pale skin. She wore a tight black dress outlining every curve of her body. Her emerald green eyes locked onto mine with a paralyzing intensity. As I approached, I noticed her calm, almost non-existent breath. Her scent, a mix of rose and something darker, intoxicated me. She didn't speak a word, but her gaze was an invitation, one I couldn't refuse. She led me to an abandoned house on the city's outskirts, a crumbling building. Inside was cold, with peeling walls and floors covered in dust and debris. She moved with ghostly grace, guiding me to an upstairs room. The room was bare except for an old velvet sofa and a lit candle on a small table. She sat down, signaling me to do the same. Her gaze never left me, deep and hypnotic. That's when I noticed her fangs, long and sharp, emerging from behind her dark red lips. A shiver of terror ran down my spine, but it was too late to flee. With a quick, precise movement, she grabbed my arm and brought it to her lips. I felt the bite, sharp and painful, followed by dizziness as my blood began to flow into her. Every encounter with her was a mix of fear and pleasure. Night after night, I found myself returning to her, unable to resist her call. She fed me her blood, a dark, thick liquid that made me feel euphoric, powerful, yet increasingly weaker. Over time, I began noticing strange events in the city. People disappearing, bodies found drained of blood. Part of me knew it was her, my nocturnal lover, causing this carnage. But I was too bound to her, too dependent on her blood to pull away. One evening, as I fed from her wrist, I heard footsteps approaching. A young boy, one of Velenthra's many street orphans, entered the room. His face lit up with terror at the scene before him. Before he could scream or escape, she was upon him, her fangs sinking into the boy's neck. That's when the reality hit me full force. I had become an accomplice to a monster, a being feeding on innocent lives. I looked at the lifeless body of the boy, feeling a mix of nausea and despair. She looked at me, her green eyes now stained with red, and smiled cruelly. "You're one of us now," she whispered in the quiet of the room. "You can't escape what you've become." I left the house, staggering and confused. Velenthra's streets now seemed a labyrinth of shadows and threats. Every face I met seemed an accusation, every gaze a judgment. My existence had become a nightmare, a prison where I was both the jailer and the prisoner. In the following days, my mind was tormented by horrific visions. I saw the boy's face everywhere in my dreams, in the shadows. His death became my beacon of guilt. I knew I had to stop her, stop the creature that had taken over my life. One night I gathered all my courage and returned to the abandoned house. It was silent, as if even the walls were waiting for my arrival. I climbed the creaking stairs, heart-pounding, hand gripping the knife I had brought. I entered the room. There she was, sitting on the velvet sofa, her eyes shining with an inhuman glow. "You've returned," she said with a smile. "You can't stay away from me." "It has to end," I said, my voice trembling with fear and determination. She rose, approaching me with the same deadly grace. "You can't kill me. You're tied to me. We are the same creature now." Her face was close to mine, and I could feel her cold breath on my skin. With a shout, I plunged the knife into her chest. She screamed, a sound that was a mix of pain and rage, then collapsed to the floor. I approached her, looking into her eyes as life left her. But in her eyes, I saw no pain or fear, only a deep, dark love. Always you, always us. Those were her last words. I walked away, shaking my head as if to rid myself of a nightmare. But as I exited the house, I felt something within me change. A thirst, a hunger I had never known before. I looked at my reflection in a store window. My eyes now had the same green glow as hers. Was it over? Or was it just the beginning of something even darker and more terrible? My reflection stared back at me, a silent challenge, and in the shadows of Velenthra, I felt the call of the night, stronger than ever.